All right, guys. Today on Leadership to Wealth, we've got a special guest as always. We've got Dr. Ian Brooks, who happens to be an organizational expert, psychologist, actually, organizational, industrial. Today's show, he's going to talk a lot about change and dealing with change within organizations. But not just that, he gets really into managing that change within ourselves, looking at himself. He shares about the journey that he's had to walk to get out of a challenging past, a family life that was less than desirable, and getting to the point of being able to even accept the limelight and write his own book that he talks about as well. And I want to introduce you to him again, as I said, Dr. Ian Brooks. Dr. Ian Brooks. Ian, thank you so much for coming on the show. You teach a lot of things, but before we get into learning about mind, body, soul, learning about success and failure and empowerment, can you share with us a little bit about who you are and kind of where you came from, and so we can get into this journey that has been for you.
Yeah, I tell you, it's a pleasure to be here, Neil. And I tell you, we all have a unique story of how we got to this very moment in time. I often talk to my clients about don't judge the book based on the chapter you walked in on. As we're having a conversation or a meeting for the first time, and although we've connected offline before, it's something that I always keep in mind as I'm working with my clients, because we all have a journey and path. And my path is while different than anyone else's, it's still not unique that we all have a story to tell. And so for me, I've always wanted to be a psychologist. So I grew up in Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C., here in the U.S. And as a 13-year-old, I made the decision that I wanted to be a psychologist. And in that moment in time, at 13, I made the decision. And I tell you, I came up with that decision for several reasons. Number one, I was fearful of judgment. So I didn't want to be too high up on the scholastic scale, athletic scale, because that offered a level of judgment and consistent expectation that if I didn't meet it, I was getting yelled at anyway. So I didn't want any part of that. And I have to try to sustain that. And that was just too hard. But I also didn't want to be too low. Right on the totem pole where I was just not doing anything because, heck, you're getting yelled at then too. So I don't want to be there. So in my mind, in a child's mind, mind you, I was like, let me just stay in the middle. Right. Let me just stay so that I'm not too high, not too low, that at least I'm consistent in not being visible to anyone. And that way it afforded me a chance not to be judged, because now I'm just fitting into the normalness of anyone who's around me, around their expectations. That also afforded me a chance to fit into my personality of just being shy or more reserved in that respect. So I was tripped into the field of psychology, taking it one day in school. We were watching the movie Cool Hand Luke, and we're breaking it Cool Hand Luke down from a psychological perspective. I was like, man, this is kind of cool. And it really sparked this idea of understanding why people do what they do. And that one decision of wanting to be a psychologist, that one acknowledgement of a question of why people do what they do, has really provided me a journey of both a profession, where I've actually lived, even the careers I've chosen, and even the people of whom I work with, a journey on helping others become better. And so as such, as that 13-year-old, I had a plan to actually say, you know what, anywhere I go, I wanted to go somewhere brand new, where I had to learn about myself, as well as acknowledging that if it's scholastic, what school did I want to go to so I can learn something, get a degree. But again, I was also learning about myself and creating a newness to me. Figuring myself out. And so that took me from a place of Virginia, then moving to Atlanta for 4 years for undergraduate, where I had a chance to, again, psychology major, work with adolescents in outpatient facilities. So that created a wonderful experience and just an acknowledgement. One of, wow, so much trauma that actually children go through. And as important, a clear definition and defining moment for me, not to want to work with children in that capacity, just because it was so heart-wrenching to hear some of the stories, and the work I was doing with those kids was just so palatable and so tough that you just want to save them all, but you can't. From that journey, going and getting my master's in clinical psychology, where I had an opportunity to work in a 24-hour lockdown ward as a clinical therapist for adults. That was a unique experience, seeing people come straight off the street who are dealing with a chemical imbalance, and seeing how they're operating in their environment, and controlling them in a way of this ward where they couldn't get out without a key, but yet so we controlled them for 14 days. And even working with adolescents or even children then, doing intelligence testing. And so that was really interesting. That afforded me a chance to say, well, shit, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. This is draining, like just emotionally draining. Yeah. And so that took me to, hey, I want to still love psychology. I'm still helping people. I still love seeing people become better, because guess what? Our essence as humans is about evolution and moving forward. And so that took me to getting my doctorate in organizational psychology and working with organizations and seeing and enabling leaders, one, transform the organizations based on their strategy, and then moving to coaching them, them being leaders and individuals one-on-one and in groups, and helping them become better, because now their normal is just the box of which they've created for themselves, while leveraging my clinical skills, applying it into now moving people forward and expansion. And so I've worked with a who's who of organizations, from a Nike to Sony to Warner Brothers to Illumina to, again, a host of companies that have been outstanding places to work, and where I've afforded an opportunity to see, one, myself grow, but as well as others. In that respect too, as I mentioned, I moved all over the place. And after I left my master's program in Alabama, I moved out here to California. And I tell you, the experience of just that exploration of trying something new, where I had to learn about myself along with my clients, was both fraught with vulnerability, but so much excitement that I find quite often in my coaches, or the individuals of whom I coach now, find that same thrill, because we trust our capabilities of being able to move forward. And as such, after some time of working with organizations and people, wrote my book, Here Intention, Building Capabilities to Transform Your Story, which originally started off just as a guide of notes, just to give people after I left them, after I was coaching them, say, hey, here's some things to keep in mind, because you keep on tripping up on this stuff. But what I realized, that I was probably writing this guide more for myself, and the things that I was learning about myself through my various journeys of career, places I've lived, and the things that I also saw in my clients. To the extent that when I first wrote the book, I had to fight my own, going back to that 13-year-old, that fear of judgment. Because hell, when I started my business of Rhodes Smith Consulting and writing my book, well, there's no hiding from that. There's no, there's no way to not be out front. And so it really took me to a place where, after I wrote the first version of my book and I heard it, because it was an actual audiobook, quite frankly, I was scared. I heard it in my voice. I was critical of what I was hearing. I took my coach's hat and was listening to myself and said, what would I tell myself in this moment? And I was like, oh shit, like this book is not what it needs to be. And I had to make a choice at that moment, as we all do in any type of change. And that was, if I'm going to write this book, I need to be able to open myself up in ways I had never allowed myself and had surrounded myself in an environment to do. And so because of that experience, and because I said, yes, I'm willing to do this for myself, less about anyone else at this point, it afforded me the chance to become the writer the book needed me to be. And as such, it's been a wonderful journey that continues to this day, that really has been fun. So that's a long-winded way of answering your question, but it's truly a path that is both winding of exploration, possibility, failure, and just knowing that it can be done.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to see if I can stay with it. The first question I gotta ask is, how in the world did a 13? Well, you gotta. I get it actually with a 13-year-old kid, but to some degree, because I was that weird kid that found psychology textbooks and started reading them as a kid, right? Like 9, 10, 11, I was reading psychology textbooks because they were like, oh, early childhood psychology, and I'm learning about myself. So it was actually really interesting. But how did the 13-year-old? Because Because you know that once you get into those teenage years, you're not supposed to remember any of those like
Right.
13-year-old dreams, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, between relationships and varsity teams and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, it's supposed to go out the window, and then you're supposed to be clued out. So how in the
Right.
world did you manage to keep that together?
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, as we think about 13-year-olds and that progression, that 13, 14, 15 in a high school and then going into college, it's to your statement, it's those things that fall off of who we are. It's just a part of the fabric of the quilt we're making. But for me, it was actually integrated into the fabric of who I am and was and how I grew up. So it wasn't something I was ever going to forget. It wasn't anything that it was like, oh, this is just a fleeting thought. Well, my fleeting thought of being a fireman and a race car driver, that's different than my idea and thought of, hey, this is who I am. Yeah. Like, I'm really curious why people do what they do. Like, I don't
believe it. I don't believe it. How in the world does a 13-year-old go, I'm going to be a clinical psychologist?
Well, it became a question of, number one, not a question, but it was a statement to myself. Like, okay, am I smart enough? Because if you had to be smart enough to get a PhD, and I knew I wanted to get a PhD. It's like, okay, because that's going to be the source of validation. What's the thing that I can really own myself where I'm not out in front? Like, I'm just curious, like where I can just ask questions, where I don't have to be out front in any respect. I can, in some ways, hide. That way I can just listen to other people where I don't have to say really what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling. For me, at that point in time, the 13-year-old, hell, that was about survival. That was less about a career. It was about survival. Like, well, I'm gonna get yelled at today. I'm gonna get a beating today. What's gonna happen? Like, now it's about paying attention. Now it's listening to the signs. And now, and I just happened to trip on a course that actually does this, where we're talking about, Freud. We're talking about, the Rorschach. We're talking about dream interpretations. We're going through an experience of like, wow, where I'm actually having to think through this. And it's like, man, that's kind of cool. Like, I want to know more about this. Like, let's go. And so it was a mixture of a decision, both of judgment, but also survival, that again, it fit into who I am and was, and in certain ways continue to be, but also puts the other person up front. Where I don't need to be in the front. I love people being successful, and I can be successful without a comparison to someone else. I'm successful as a result of the comparison to the bar I set for my individual self. And that's it, not to a bar someone set for me or to what someone else is doing. And that's what the fabric of psychology has afforded me in my personality, how I grew up, and it's evolved, right? Yes, I did get a PhD. Yes, I did do clinical, but I could not have authored in a story and the things that I've seen and done and at all. Versus a statement as a child saying, I want to be a psychologist. And guess what? I did it. Yeah.
What was the trauma behind that? Was there a trauma behind that?
Yeah, there was. I touched on it slightly, and the trauma was specifically when I growing up, my family was very driven. Both my parents, who are going to be celebrating 50 years of marriage next year. Both they met in college. Yeah, that's a one hell of an achievement in and of itself. But they both went to college, both driven, and both wanting us to be successful. Now, having 3 kids who are all similar in age ranges. There's a lot of pressure that, young people had then. So guess what? Pressure of them trying to be successful as a young couple, having young children and having their own devices, right? You're thinking about the 70s at this point, not just some, time like, hey, let's sit down and talk. Like some of the nuances of how children are raised today, just think about in the context of a time and place where people were living and the time and place where my parents were living. It was lived by sometimes force in certain ways. So that means beating. So sometimes that was, yelling, screaming, throwing things. In hell, as a kid, that's fear, right? That's the situation you step back and say, I want no part of this. Like, who am I going to get today? Who's going to walk through that door? Like, I want no part of it. And did I do everything that I could and if I didn't, well, shit, sometimes you didn't even know. Right. And so it's from those experiences, like really shaped my perspective and creating that personal awareness. Right. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be heard. I have no interest in that because that creates visibility of which I have no interest in. Thank you.
Keep me out of it.
Yeah, like, I'm real clear about that. I like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And so save that for somebody else who doesn't know any better, but I do, and I'm cool with just staying in the middle. Let me just keep an even keel. Yeah. And so that's really what sparked it. And really is why I even go back and even work with people and otherwise, because that's really what it's about, and being better. And that experience really shaped who I've become and the person I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, no, I said, there's no way no 13-year-old is supposed to be thinking clinical psychology. I know why I was reading psychology textbooks, and that was because my dad was an alcoholic, and you know, we used to. I got immigrant parents, man. I was an immigrant myself, so you know, we got beat. And then add alcohol to it made it worse. And so what you're saying in terms of the fear and trying to stay out of the light, because it wasn't a good thing, you know, because then you just become it's the same as painting a target, right?
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, it's right. It's a situation that it really creates one hell of a piece of awareness.
And as a kid, you don't know why you're getting targeted, right? By the people that are supposed to love you, right? And so you're trying to figure that out. And so I was like, oh no, there's got to be something. I'm like, this can't be the one brilliant guy that I'm gonna be a clinical psychologist.
It truly did start off that way, but it really boiled itself down to, why do people do what they do? What are their coping mechanisms? What's their ability to communicate? And it really wasn't until going through that experience and even well past I left my clinical time, because I really didn't know how to even put it into my words even then, of the experience that it created for me, or even allowed myself to even speak about. It's one of those situations that over time, gaining comfort and acknowledgement of what happened, not to say it was right or wrong, as much as an acknowledgement, and how we've all grown. Both myself, my parents, my siblings, and we take that as a place of reference, not of resident. And that's true for any change. And when that happens, I'm no longer a prisoner to that experience, as much as I'm acknowledging the experience for something that can be one of reflection and positivity, and even how do I want to do things differently moving forward. So that's it.
And that, and then and so I'm even hearing, I'll just tell you what I'm hearing as you're sharing. I'm like, okay, now I get where this man's got his superpowers coming from, because it's all a journey, right? But as you grow, as you go through things and you grow, you realize, if you look back, you realize, most of our strengths usually come out of some of the most challenging of times, right? And
absolutely.
And now I'm going to speculate, but you know, that it's also what leads you into being a man that is out there sharing and empowering, providing that empowerment message, because you know what it is to be afraid. You know what it is to be insecure, and you know what it is to not be sure of yourself. And so now here you are being a champion for others.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the things that, you know, I think you've touched on a few things, but the first being about myself, my own journey, and going through it from a personalized experience. That doesn't mean to be a good professional, you need to go through everything yourself. Like, I don't need to be an addict to know that experience. Although you know, I have addicts in my family, I recognize the turmoil that creates, right? No different than I'm sure that, you know, that's what alcoholism can do to a family and an experience, and and how love is demonstrated. one of the things that I also took from each one of my experiences of where I lived and the jobs I've taken was really to really want to acknowledge what did I want to get out of that experience. So creating as much situation as possible where I can see people in different places, where I can see them in different situations. So when I'm looking and talking to an adolescent child who was raped by her father, that's one hell of a lot different conversation than talking to another child, you know, and I'm doing intelligence testing and they're coming from a wonderful background, or I'll air quote wonderful because everyone's background is a little bit different and nothing's perfect, versus an adult who has a chemical imbalance and needs to be on medication for the rest of their life, versus talking to a COO in their situation. Each of us have a different background and story of which we're being told, but yet each one of those situations doesn't take us far away from who we are as people. And that is, we just want to be better. And we start to see the patterns and the templates of which one we individually create, but what's created across us all, and the stories that we're creating and living. It's really powerful to be able to see that. And it's something that I've been really intentional about in how can I see this in different situations? Because what assumptions am I making at the time as a therapist in a clinical setting, or now as a coach? What assumptions am I making about my own background or about this person? What it forced me to do is be a better listener, but also being better at asking questions. And to allow the experience to come about. I often talk to my coachees about this. I always give them the example of it's very much similar to Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy's only goal was to get back to Kansas. That was it. She didn't know how she got to where she was, but all she knew that she wanted to get back to Kansas. Oz was just nothing more than a milestone. Her path, and she didn't know it until someone told her, was just follow the yellow brick road. Well, she could follow the yellow brick road, but her path was her path. So she didn't know she was going to run into the Tin Man, Scarecrow, Cowardly Lion, the Oz. She didn't know she was going to run into the Wicked Witch to the west. None of that. But what she did have, though, was true purpose on where she was going. And she knew that whatever she was faced with, she was still going to be able to make it through, even though she didn't know what was coming. For me, I've afforded myself in my own life to be able to do that, saying I know the plan, but my path is my path. And I can't dictate the path necessarily. As good as my plan can be, that path will take its own direction. And I think as we talk about our own stories and the people I work with, I constantly bringing this back up because we try to control so much. And I know that going back to my own childhood, my own story, I'm influenced by so many assumptions, by my own fears, by my own vulnerability, and affording myself to understand my plan, but also being comfortable and flexible enough and confident enough in being able to manage my path. I'm still going to be able to get there. It's just being open to the possibility.
Ooh. Whoo. Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. That's but the best. It's funny. I've watched that. I don't know how many times. My mom used to make us watch it growing up. But that is such a great analogy for life and the ability to even mark a path. Mark a path, but not be able to control the journey, right? Did I get that right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You don't know the journey, and hell, you don't even know what your path is. Sometimes you need a coach or somebody to tell you with that. Hey, I think you can do it.
So somebody had to tell her follow the yellow brick road, right?
Right. Right.
And before the adventure even began, someone had to say, "Hey, follow the yellow brick road." And I get that too. That's wow. I'm going to have to go watch The Wizard of Oz. Okay. Guys, if you're watching, go make a note to go watch The Wizard of Oz. You're going to see it from a whole different lens. Okay. I got it. And that is really powerful. Now, I'm just going to try and fast forward just on what you shared. Sure. So you go to school and you're now into... you're now doing clinical work and you're working with kids and you're like, no, I'm not staying here. That I can understand. because my wife's actually a registered nurse, and
Okay.
she's worked with kids, with cancer and kidney
Mhm.
failure and stuff
Mhm.
like that. Now, special women, I'll give a shout out to my wife, special women. She loves working with them, and I've also seen many of her coworkers
Mhm.
that would come and had to leave because it can really be traumatic at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Um, can you say something about what that was like to work with kids?
Yeah, it was very heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
Especially early on in my career. I think it came in two different ways. One, the stories I was hearing, but also my own internal capabilities or the lack
Mm,
thereof at the time to be able to handle it.
yeah.
I think first and foremost, working with the children and hearing their stories. As I mentioned, I just touched on one just even briefly.
Yeah.
Hearing a story of a child raped by a father and then contracting AIDS as a result.
Mm,
Um, and how do you talk to a child who doesn't know what's happening,
yeah.
who doesn't have necessarily the vocabulary or the emotions to understand what's actually happening or to even express it, or talking to another child, and working with him, and all he wanted to do was play checkers. And he was there because he just happened to be laying in bed with his mom and another sibling, and the father had came in and shot the mother with a shotgun and killed her. And
Wow.
what do you say? How do you handle something like that? Now, mind you, I'm giving examples and my experience, both working with children and adults from a clinical setting, is probably the ones that it's not what you see on TV, right? Or if it is, it's probably on the special victims unit type of uh, uh, TV shows where it's truly trauma, the things that we couldn't even probably fathom. And when we do, it scares the hell out of us.
Hmm.
And that's what it did to me. It scared me because now I'm helping children and seeing the realities of what people are faced with, both based on my own experience, right, of that fear of getting beat and not knowing what's going to happen,
Yeah.
and trying to help kids, but also was I even equipped, now speaking to myself, to even handle that and being able to exercise that and to let it go and not carry that stuff home. And I realized that when I was working with children and even when I was working with adults, hearing their stories and working with their families to try to get them better through group or even individual therapy, it's weared on me to a place that I didn't know how to release that. Now I could release it like any good writer or other people and, smoke or drink. But that wasn't a solve. I could
Mm,
immerse myself into something else other than myself, but it still sat with me, that things that I couldn't let go. And I knew that wasn't healthy for me. And it really took two instances when I was working with the adults to say, you know what, I need to work with some higher functioning people, or maybe not higher functioning, they can just cope better. Um, it was one when I had to wash a grown man because he couldn't wash himself. Myself and the orderly had to go and wash him. I was like, I can't do this all day, or I'm not going to do this ever again. This is just not something that's good. But then I was meeting and talking to one of the other clients, and he was there for quite some time. And when I walked in, I said, "Hello." I'm going to make up his last name. "Hello, Mr. Tony. How are you doing today?" And he would always say, "Doing the best I can." And I remember
mm,
driving home one day after hearing him say that, and it just after a long day, and I just recalled him saying that, and then applying that to my own life. And I'm like, well, shit, we're all doing the best we can.
yeah.
Some of us can have the resources to do something else that
Yeah.
by our own selves versus others. And from those two experiences, and also recognizing the weight that I carried with me from my experiences and the stories I was hearing,
Mm,
really sparked okay, I want to do something else. The skills that I learned as a clinician still stay with me today, and I'm a clinician at heart. But now I'm working with a different population of now we're just looking at expansion. And so from that experience said, yep, I want to work with organizations and people and also be a leader. It'd be fun to be a traveling consultant and work with people and see change management in a way that is working with higher functioning people while also caring for my own values of wanting to help people, but also caring for people in their journeys in a lot of different ways.
whew. Um, Man, story gets deeper and deeper.
Yes.
Now, I appreciate the natural transition there. I can see how you've gone from there, and now you are into organizational, which I didn't even know. I was like, what in the world is an organizational psychologist? Organizational
Right.
and industrial psychologist. Is that correct?
Industrial psychologist. Yep. Industrial and organizational psychologist. Yep.
And then I was like, okay, well, organizational, I guess that kind of makes sense. And psychologist kind of, well, what the heck does an industrial psychologist, like he comes in with a battle suit and like, all right, let's go. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
But now you've taught, you shared obviously that you've dealt with companies like Sony and Nike and some of these companies. And so I'm guessing that work is now, you're now dealing with what, organizational change and growth, things like that.
Yeah. So in that field, and just from a general perspective, it is dealing with organizations, and more in particular, how it impacts their people. So it takes the look of organizational change. So it could be change management from an new org design, talent planning, coaching, HR. If there's technology influences, it can be that. And so it really runs that gamut of even culture management, as well as performance management, really fall within this realm as well. As well as in particular leadership development, which fits into that coaching realm, but more in particular within the context of organizations. And so when I made the transition, I was looking at everything holistically across that IO space. And so I had a chance to work with IBM as an employee and traveling around 100%, doing the consultant thing and going in and, with suit and tie and dragging my laptop behind me through airports and so forth. And, but it also created a journey of saying, hey, I like working with organizations, but more importantly, I like working with people. And so it afforded me to work specifically with doing leadership development internally. So, and running culture management. And at that time, I was working at Countrywide Financial, running their culture management for one of their groups. And if you remember Countrywide Financial, they're at the cusp of the housing market collapse. And so being a change manager, having a clinician's background, but also being a manager at that time, really I was an employee at that, was able to see the changes that an organization goes through and its impact on people and the craziness that it sparks and the rumors and the fear and your company's in the headlines every day. And it afforded me a chance to even test my own leadership and the things of which I was spouting and teaching others, but really enabled me to expand upon my own values as a leader and how I was treating my own employees in a way that really afforded me a chance to expand even more as I became a leader in other capacities with other groups, and how I was even coaching leaders moving forward.
Yeah. Wow. A moment like that would absolutely test you in, do I actually know what I think I know? And does it actually, what I've been saying, is it going to hold up?
Yeah. And am I living to this? Am I, all the stuff I profess, like, am I even doing this? Like, how well am I communicating? What are the reasons we can't necessarily communicate? Like, we have to hold tight on what these organizational decisions are until they actually come out. But certain things, it's like, okay, this is going to happen. It also taught, the really drove home the idea of politics and the idea of how does one navigate, create influence? How do they now drive strategy? How do you create motivation and offer support, even in down times? It was a firsthand opportunity to say, well, shit. All right. Now bringing back in my clinical work about other people, but also checking myself at the same time was extremely important exercise, and one that I will not forget ever. Because the moment I do, we're doomed to repeat it. But it also affords me a chance to really help the leaders of whom I work with from a coaching perspective, as well as when I'm working one-on-one now with my coachees around the experiences of fear and vulnerability that just come around us.
You've got to be writing a paper right now. I mean, COVID must be giving you a real, I don't even know on your side. I can tell you on the real estate side, on the finance side, I could probably write papers on what we've seen, right? So tell me what's that experience been like for a man who's supposed to handle organizational change and psychology? How do you deal with that while everybody's at their own homes?
COVID has really underscored the challenges both in organizations and people in general. Going back to organizations, those organizations that were more able to seamlessly get into working remotely and working with their teams across the globe had technology and process structures that were already enabled, without them even knowing, to actually pivot very quickly, where they didn't rely upon the brick and mortar to actually move forward. Those who were not as quick to adapt in that respect had to figure it out on the go. So they were truly reacting to something. Now, as we all know, when we're reacting, it helps a lot slower for us to go through. We're more apt to make mistakes. We're going to be tripping over ourselves. Oh, hello, restaurant industry, right? Especially
what I was thinking about.
What's that?
I said that's what I was thinking about.
It's one of those situations like that. I mean, it's a prime example. They were struggling, and so some businesses were able to quickly pivot and move forward in that respect. Others weren't. I also found it very interesting that from an individualistic standpoint within organizations, as we think about developing talent, like we're so built on our leaders having visibility and creating visibility for their employees and for themselves, that now we're having to lead it differently, where our communication is extremely a lot more important. Our transparency is more heightened, and not transparency because I need to see you on Zoom, but transparency so that I'm very clear on what I'm actually articulating. Those organizations, and more in particular, those leaders who were able to do that, their skills really were able to shine through on that, both in a positive way as well as negative way. I was recently heard a stat that people are leaving companies left and right, and one of the top 3 reasons was they didn't like the way that they were being treated during COVID. And it was, in my mind, that's an acknowledgement of, quite honestly, leaders' abilities were shining through, that they're leaving because they were probably good leaders before, or the values that are now heightened because all the noise of coming into an office, all the noise of our day-to-day lives, of running kids to soccer practice or going to a happy hour or flying here or flying there, we've taken all that out. So now I have nothing more to look at the person in the mirror, in this case, the person on Zoom, to say, is this really where I want to be? Like, crap. And I've got to look at you. I've got to do this all for however long. No wonder people are trying to get out of the house. No wonder, like, the heck with the vaccination, or give me the vaccination so I can go back to work, or leave, because it highlights so many things for us. It highlights so many gaps that our life, and the noise we create and surround ourselves with, masks, which leads me to the individual side. I've been fortunate enough to coach people during this experience. And one of the biggest challenges is how they deal with the noise and being able to create space for the quiet. If you ever sit in a meeting and just ask a question that someone doesn't know the answer to, and just sitting there and allowing them to answer the question without filling the space. Most people can't do it, because now they're forced to now think, to now place a judgment and acknowledgement on what they're thinking and actually saying it. And that causes fear, vulnerability, judgment. And that really has shined through for those people who are actually able to get down to the quiet, of which COVID has afforded us. Some chaos sometimes, with kids running around the background and otherwise. But it's also for those people who were able to adapt in that way, really looked around and said, hey, I can manage this. What really changed? I'm just not going in an office, or I'm not going to soccer practice. I can do something else. Versus, shit, I want to get back in the office. Why are they telling us what we can and can't do? We need to get these kids out here doing stuff. But that's a heck of a lot different reaction versus that reaction is one of fear versus one of The rules of this game have changed. Got it. I didn't create these rules. I now know them, but let's play.
Yeah.
That's a different perspective. And that's even a different experience of what organizations who have done this very well throughout this time have done. They've adapted to the rules and sometimes even created their own, as well as the individual choices people have made as well. And so I have been writing quite a bit about that, as well as even coming out of COVID and how we're so quick to come out of COVID with vaccinations and so forth, that guess what? We're seeing our spikes again because no different than change. We think an instance or a milestone is the end result, and we have a finish line. When COVID, much like change, there is no finish line. It's what do we sustain, and how have we built that sustainment and integrated it into our lives? Wow. Guess what? We haven't. So those are all the things I'm writing about or seeing or starting to write about as well.
Man, for those of you that are watching this, I hope you're catching this. This man is dropping gold right now, but it might take having to rewind and replay and just listen to what he's saying. I am fortunate that I have been working from home for many years. Mm-hmm. And, everyone, a lot of people know Toronto. It's one of the largest cities in the world. Mm-hmm. I drive in when I need to drive in, and then I work from home. And I have a nice office. I look out the window, and I get to enjoy that. Mm-hmm. So when COVID hit, mm-hmm. it didn't make much of a change in my life. Mm-hmm. For the most part, initially. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we saw was initially people were like, oh, hey, great, I get to stay home. I mean, obviously there was lots of fear, but there was some of the things that I started to see was some people just, they weren't doing work. Yes. But the majority of people that I spoke to actually were increasing their workload mm-hmm. because they're sitting at home thinking, I don't know what else to do, so I might as well work. And they were actually being, I'm going to say more productive, mm-hmm. But they were definitely just putting in more hours. Yeah. Whereas people that perhaps had families, had kids, mm-hmm. they were seeing this opportunity to spend with their kids.
Yes.
And that was definitely something that I got because I've got 4 kids, and summer break didn't last for 2 months. It lasted for 18.
Right.
Hence the reason that I got a specialized mic and headphones mm-hmm. so that if they make noise, I can still do my stuff. But sure. Anyways, what I'm saying, what you're sharing, I'm hearing what you're talking about. I'm thinking, oh yeah, I've seen all of these ups and downs of how people are trying to cope with it individually, mm-hmm. and the frustrations that they've gone through. And then what you're talking about with regards to the team leaders and the leaders in the organization. Yeah, absolutely. Because how many jumped to, hey, get on Zoom mm-hmm. as their only mode of keeping people in line. Like, oh, I need to be like, almost like I'm going to walk by your desk to see if you're actually working.
Yes.
And that's a form of leadership.
Yes,
if you, I can't say that I like that form of leadership, right? But I think these are some of the things that you're pointing to.
Yes.
But what I really got out of that was you talking about the silence. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how we're not comfortable with that silence. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how I just had some friends come out for the weekend out here to Kingston, and mm-hmm. they did not know what to do mm-hmm. with the silence, without the streetcars and all mm-hmm. the things going up and down, and people. It's so quiet that you can hear what's going on in your own head, which
Yes.
I happen to think is really cool, but
Yes.
a lot of people don't. So
Yeah.
do you have anything to say about, because I think it's unnerving for a lot of people,
It is.
a lot of what they're going through and the protests we're seeing, as you alluded to. I think a lot of what we're seeing there is really people, not more than anything, I think, not being comfortable with hearing just what's going on inside their own head.
Absolutely. And to that very statement, it's created a heightened awareness of what we hear, and then what we search for from a social media standpoint really anchors us back to a consistency of groupthink. Of, if I like McDonald's, guess what? I'm going to search for McDonald's, and 10 minutes later, I'm going to see 30 ads on McDonald's. Right? Because it's all geared towards, oh, you just searched this, so guess what? You're getting McDonald's. Yeah. So even in our thinking, in that silence, and what we search for and what we just naturally gravitate towards, social media has driven us towards, hey, we're going to continue your theme of what you have, and so it's going to give you more propaganda for that. So as you think about protests, as we think about, here obviously states, George Floyd, the death, really galvanizing, creating visibility in ways that hadn't necessarily been available because there was so much other noise that was taking shape around us. Also here in the States, obviously with, the insurrection after the election, people voicing their concerns and storming the Capitol, and what did that mean? And it galvanized people's thoughts and emotions. And guess what? I don't see any of that going away. In fact, I think it's just going to be even extended. Not only one, of getting lost in our own thoughts, but secondly, how social media and even the bots behind social media even drive our thoughts and thinking to fill that void in certain ways. But when we give ourselves a chance to just unplug, we give ourselves a chance to have a rich dialogue, both with someone such as yourself, or just being lost in our own thoughts, it creates, to your very statement, some fear if you're not used to it. It creates vulnerability of a sense of validation, because our thoughts naturally gravitate towards what we currently know, what we currently live by, through our own assumptions. And, oh yeah, by the way, through our own survival technique, right? Yeah. What do we currently know? Those things aren't bad, but they also may not be accurate, or we may have outlived those truths. But when we're in our own minds and we have noise around us, we don't afford ourselves the opportunity to escape in that way, to really expand beyond what we currently already know. And it does spark fear. So as I work with my clients, and one of the activities I ask them to do each week is, I say, I call it out even in my book, I say, just pause, just pause, just stop. Whatever you're doing, just stop. I want you to process. There's a second step. Process whatever just happened, right? Take it. Don't offer a judgment. Offer just an acknowledgement of, what did you see? What did you feel? What did you experience? And then reflect. Reflect on the assumptions that are driving some of those thoughts and feelings. Reflect on how you may have caused that, or what in your history and our stories have created that narrative. Again, it's not a judgment, it's just an acknowledgement. And from being able to pause, process, and reflect, not in a place of trying to be right or wrong, but in a place of neutrality, we can then say, okay, I acknowledge this. Now, how do I now want to move forward? What do I now want to say is true? And it's not about a race of like, oh, I need to think about every single thing in my day. It's like, oh, let me pause, process, reflect on how I tied my shoes. No, right? No, it's, who am I? And it's probably one of the scariest things that people avoid, because who am I is not about a ROI. Yeah, who am I is defined based off of a return on heartbeat. It's based off of acknowledgement of my own story, of my own characters, own choices, right, wrong, or indifferent. It doesn't make me any bad or worse, just makes me human. But also allows me to afford myself a chance to make a choice. And that choice is what separates us from robots. That the data may 100 times tell us to turn left, but I still have the choice to turn right.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. Absolutely. Why do you think that we rush to judgment?
Yeah. Judgment offers finality. It affords us a chance to put things in a box. When we're actually lost in our
boxes.
Yeah, everyone likes the box. Like it's I can now give you a definition of who you are. Because now that's what we're defining it as. Now I know how to interact with you. If you're not in a box, if I don't have a judgment, then I don't know how to act. I don't know, like, okay, then now what do I do? Right? I don't know.
Yeah.
And now, because I have no frame of reference of which to operate in, right? And so when we rush to that judgment, it's now comfort in saying, yes, I can go do, because I know what box you're in. It's like, well, sometimes that's right. Yeah. But when we live our lives based off of that,
right?
When COVID hits, well, guess what? There is no box.
Wow.
Now you're trying to rely upon historical frames of reference and of acting that no longer apply. And as such, you're going to struggle. You're going to find frustration. You're going to be angry. You're going to be rushed to do whatever you can to say, yes, this is the way we always do it. Right? That's the way we have done it. Check. Always have done it, sure. But is that the way we need to continue to do it? And I think that's one of the bigger challenges with any change, is being able to let go of those judgments, of those boxes of which we've created for ourselves to create our own survival and comfort. We're running as woolly mammoths and running from the lions and staying in packs for survival because we know what survival means for us. Mm-hmm. This box tells me that judgment affords me a chance for comfort. Even if I don't like the box, it gives me comfort in knowing that at least I know what I'm dealing with. Get outside that box, I don't know. And it goes back to, a Wizard of Oz analogy. It's truly affording ourselves a chance to create the experience through our path, because our path is our path. Your plan is your plan. Yeah.
How do you teach that to an organization without destroying an organization?
Right.
Because it occurs to me, I didn't think about it back when I used to work a job, and they would talk to you about, think outside the box.
Right.
The moment I started thinking outside the box, I no longer fit in the organization.
Yes.
I was like,
right. That's exactly right. It's funny. That's the expansion and the awareness that we sometimes create by thinking outside the box. Like, why in the heck am I here? Like, I shouldn't be here. There's a reason why I have my own company, right? There's a reason why you have your company. Like, I thank you for the box you gave me, but I've expanded past this. Thank you.
Yeah.
So when I'm in organizations, a lot of them are just trying to oftentimes execute against a strategy. And so ultimately what that means is they're creating boxes. So they're not saying they're expanding and thinking outside the box, but they've created a separate box for you.
Right.
So when I'm doing technical changes, for an example, one of the big things that I start off by doing is anchoring with the executive team or the executive sponsor around how's this tied to the values of the organization? How's this tied to a 2-year plan? What's the impetus? What's the reason now? Because that executive isn't changing. It's his 3 deep or his 4 deep groups of people whose behavior has to change, where their process has to change, where they're going to have to do something different. For that executive, they're just looking at a spreadsheet. So it's a little bit different dialogue. So in being able to think outside the box, it's that executive is looking at it from a ROI perspective, from a perspective of boxes I'm moving from an org chart on this PowerPoint. When I'm actually working with that 3D, 4D team of actually looking at behavior, I'm now expanding them to say what's in it for them, what's truly changing versus what's staying the same, and then what's gone altogether. That dialogue creates an expansion of, hey, you're categorically what we're doing is the same. What we're doing is the same. Now I'm building and refining your skills to do something different with the same process, and maybe even the process changes. But now we're just refining your skills and building your capabilities there. That's a little bit different dialogue than when I'm coaching leaders, in particular, either one-on-one or in a broader context within organizations, whereby I'm now getting them to think outside what they've been successful with already. Because guess what? You've been successful. Heck, you can keep doing what you're doing. Maybe bumpy roads, and you might create a wake behind you, but that we can probably lessen. But quite honestly, you could probably keep doing what you're doing. There, the conversation takes a little bit different turn because now there's a certain level of accountability, of expansion and thinking outside the box of something that they've always done. And what they've always done is kept themselves comfortable.
Yeah.
So we can think outside of our box because that creates an uncertainty, a vulnerability. Am I still going to be successful? How am I going to be viewed? I'm already successful now. So what's the reason I should change other than someone from HR or otherwise has determined that I should have a coach?
Wow. Great point. Yeah.
Now they've projected that onto me. Now I can just go in, quite frankly, again, in my job, I'm looking at spreadsheets. So I'm really not changing anything that I'm doing, but now I'm asking you to actually change your behavior. Also change the way that you're thinking. Also change the way that you're planning around your behaviors and thinking. That's a heck of a lot different conversation of getting outside of that box. But it's always in that getting outside that box and that expansion to do and think more broadly to the betterment of your teams, your peers, and even the implementation of your strategy. Because all of those things are still true. It's now the refinement in building additional skills to actually move forward and break ourselves with these chains, or in this case, the box people place us in.
Wow. There's a reason that you need a PhD to work through that. I'm like, holy crow. Yeah,
right.
I
probably a simple question. I'm throwing a whole kitchen sink at you. And
no, I was working. You had me working there. It's like, okay, you got the executives working here, and they're doing this, and I'm just trying to follow the flow that you're sharing, and I was like, that makes sense why they would hire you, because you get to come in all seriousness, you get to come in and plot that out, because they're management's already working within their parameters. They're thinking about all their things. And that really is the power of bringing in a consultant to come in and, hey, I need you to handle this. And you're going to be the guy for the entire organization that handles this. And because those intricacies, that manager, that executive is just not going to be capable to handle. As much as I can just hear what you said and go, okay, that is making some sense, some semblance of sense to me. There's no way for me to implement that in a real life situation. And so that's where your specialized knowledge, experience come in, and you're really able to help them with that organizational change, with the industrial changes that are going on. That's what I just saw.
Yeah, and it's obviously I'm giving a truly I went from high level to getting down into the weeds of that explanation. Working and obviously in the context of our conversation, clearly short term in that. And in the context of working with leaders, it takes time, right? Because I also know that I'm not trying to be an employee. I'm a consultant. I'm a coach. I'm helping you build capabilities so that you can sustain this. So I don't need you to be me. I need you to be you. I need you to integrate this into what you're going to do. Now, in that respect, I will build the plans and I will implement the strategy to establish the foundation for you to move forward and for me to help you carry this forward. So maybe it is 90% me, 10% you. But as we start getting down to other milestones, that's going to take a little bit different flavor of 70% me, 30% you. Yeah. Or depending upon someone else, it could be 40% me, 60% you. And so by the time I'm leaving, now it's 80% you, 20% me. And now be who you are, because that's where your authenticity comes in, because now it's going to be built into your fabric, not mine. And as important, set a foundation for you to move forward. But understand, it's just not in a microcosm of our silos of, I got a project. Well, no shit, you got a project. You don't need me to help you get to that milestone. Just tell people what to do and call it a day. But if you really want to do something, if you really want to change, this is not about a technology. It's not about an employee survey result. This is really about human behavior at its essence and at its core. And going back to that 13-year-old Ian, why do we do what we do? There's a hell of a lot more about us than the situation we find ourselves in this organization or this strategy. Let's go back to your 13-year-old self and the decisions you made and the things that have been right or wrong, because guess what? That's going to come up now. And let's work through this. So how does an organizational industrial psychologist also become, I mean, you should just have another slash, because aren't you like the organizational industrial slash mixologist, you know? Mixologist, psychologist. Oh, hey, you're the mixologist psychologist. Hey, there we go. That's absolutely it, because you need a couple of drinks just to understand half the things I'm saying. But and then everybody is like, "Oh, now I get it." Right? Like, that was outstanding. Can you say that again? Give me another drink while you're at it. Right. You know, it's funny. It's I've obviously, again, always had a plan of trying to understand why people do what they do, and so aside from getting my master's in clinical and doctorate in industrial organization psych, you know, having the, you know, getting going to bartending school and learning how to make drinks, because what better way to meet people and really have some interesting conversations. I guess it's kind of like driving for Uber these days, where you can just meet some really interesting people. And heck, learn how to make drinks as a result, while also getting my certification in my NASM certification in personal training, as that's from a physical standpoint of transformation and why people do what they do and the stories they tell themselves in their own evolution. But from a mixology standpoint, it's fun because I learned so much as in a lot of different contexts and themes that tie directly to being a coach and this idea of transformation. Yeah. And the two that I talk about even in my book, Intention, is it really stems around, the one was like making the cheap mistake. And so the idea behind making a cheap mistake, I learned going into bartending school, was always pour your juice before you pour your liquor. Because if you overpour on your juice, you can throw that out. If you overpour on your liquor, now while that might be great for the patron, right? They can be like, yes, give me more liquor most of the time. That's bad for the bar because we're losing money, and that changes the flavor and the project of which this drink is intended to offer. And so that's more expensive to toss that liquor out, or try to now calculate in your head how much I need to pour and otherwise. So always make the cheap mistake. And that applies to us when we're embarking upon changes. Like, create and identify situations where you can make the cheap mistake, where if you overpour or mess up or fail, what's lost? Now, your time, sure, but at least you tried it and now you learned something from it, but you can always start over. Mm-hmm. Whereby thinking that, I had a friend of mine, he wanted to start playing golf, had never played golf in his life. Guess what he wanted to do? He wanted to go out there and buy some, the clubs Tiger Woods uses, some, ungodly amount of money of golf clubs. Now, if you're playing every day and you've got a pretty good handicap and so forth, go for it. All right, there's nothing wrong with that. Or you see yourself playing like that, go for it. But you don't even know how to swing a club. So why in the hell are you going to buy this expensive club? For what reason? It doesn't make sense. Make the cheap mistake. Learn on something that, quite frankly, you don't mind throwing away. Or, hey, you're going to learn from this and you can refine. And as you start to get better, you can now build up to getting the club Tiger Woods uses. Life is very much in a very similar fashion. In our changes, we oftentimes try to rush to an end result. Like, I just want to see what I see on YouTube or Instagram. I just want to look like that, or I want that money, or I want that house, I want that lifestyle. Make the cheap mistakes. Start your journey. And people aren't affording themselves the journey. And it's sad. It's really sad in that respect. So make the cheap mistake.
I love it. I love it. I started this podcast, and with this podcast, I mean, really, it was out of social media, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that at the beginning, but started because of social media. My following was asking me about podcasting, or I suggested podcasting. They liked it, but they didn't know how to do it, so I started it.
Okay.
Now, I started it with Zoom, and the free Zoom. You get 45 minutes or whatever. You can record it. You can upload it to YouTube. It's free. It's all free. And no microphone, no lighting, no nothing, right? And so the cheap mistake, right? If it doesn't work, okay, I didn't spend any money.
Yeah.
Right. And then of course now I've added a microphone and new camera and all this different stuff as we've gone further. But I do like what you're even sharing there, because it speaks to even getting into action. Because sometimes we're so busy just thinking about things that we never get around to doing them. And the thoughts are in our brains fighting with all the other things that are in there. So jumbled up, and then we face a thing like COVID, where now we have to listen to all of those things that are swirling around. Right. So I appreciate that. Can you tell us, I want to come back to the book and find out a little bit more about the book, but just before I do that, what's next for you?
Yeah, I've got a number of things percolating. That's to say the least.
What's in the not rumor mill? What's in the I don't know.
What irons are in the fire?
Yeah. There, that's it. Good.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm continuing to do is have my group coaching. So aside from my one-on-one coaching from a personal standpoint, really expanding out to really establish a foundation in a lot deeper sense of what does it mean to change and evolve. So I'm really starting to expand my group coaching from just from a localized conversation to now much more of a global conversation, and bringing people in. And so in that context, it's 4 people coming in, no more than 6 coming in, and really using that collaborative conversation while also embarking upon a very specific journey that they're going through from a change perspective over a 6-week period. So my next sessions are actually kicking off. The first ones are this round anyway, are kicking off here in later September, and another round is kicking off in October. So really this jumpstart and lead into the holidays, while also important leading into the new year. As we all know, New Year's resolutions get kicked off, and we all have high expectations for ourselves around whatever we're going to do differently in the year, blah, 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 only to be fraught with, I'll get to it next year, or after 3 months, stop. So really helping people build a foundation from a group coaching standpoint is kicking off a lot more bigger detail. I'm also doing more writing. So I'm actually starting the development of another book that'll be coming up, even though this one took me 4 years to write. And it was almost my cheap mistake in a number of respects, really affording myself a chance to now put my voice in a lot broader, a lot more specific detail as well around change and one's evolution. And through the conversations I'm having with yourself, as well as others, really seeing what comes to the forefront. What questions can I help tell and author a story to that helps people move forward in their own journeys? So it's between those two big things. Anything else, I'd be just greedy and tired.
Well, I mean, good luck with that, because I'm thinking organizational change through COVID is should have you busy enough just in and of itself.
Yes.
That's because now we're still seeing the other side of it, which is how do you get people back?
Yes.
And people that want to come back and people don't want to come back, and what about the amount of space that you get? I mean, different places have different restrictions, and vaccinations, no anti-vaxxers. You know, I mean, we had on the show a gentleman by the name of Jason Greer, who's an employee and labor relations expert, and he was talking about we were speculating on all of the divisive topics that are out there, and are they media driven, and what we really came to was we're actually seeing the media being forced into having to report on the things that are underlying, that have been ignored for so long, and they're getting, they're being forced into reporting on the Black Lives Matter. They're being forced into reporting about, the incidents at the White House, and sorry, not at the White House, at the
Capitol,
the Capitol, right? At the Capitol, all these different vaxxers, anti-vaxxers, all of these topics they can't ignore them, even if they wanted to try to tell us that everything's good. And we were just speculating on this, of course, but there really is something to this whole idea of change management, not just in organizations, not just in industry, but across the fabric of our society, and for the first time across the world as well.
It's forcing us to have a reckoning in a way that has eluded us, and I think it's underscored that we get so far down a path and we think we've arrived. And COVID is a great example that we thought we arrived. We saw our numbers going down. People were getting vaccinated, patting ourselves on the back. It's almost like congratulating ourselves before we've even hit the finish line. But then when we hit the finish line, we realize that we're not done. And guess what? It happens in change all the time, where we've built our whole infrastructure on a plan, not built it into and integrated into our life, not in a way that we can now live to whatever our new normal is. People are just rushing to get back to normal, whatever that was 20 months ago. To make whatever themselves feel good, or get back to yes, I'm out here going to restaurants and being able to fly and see my families, et cetera, et cetera. Yet here we are seeing, new cases come up with the Delta variant, Lambda variant as well. And even with people who have been vaccinated, and people are just tired. And that's what happens with change, because even the thought and the mental process of which we've all gone through and even go through in any change before we even do is so tiring. Because when we really see all the things we were supposed to do and can do, oh shit, I don't want to do this. I just want to do this one time. Can I be done? It's no, we have to build in the right behaviors. And COVID is an example of that. And we see it in change all the time. It's an exercise in change, of which it's the reason why self-help is such a hot topic, and always has been. It's $1 billion industry. And quite frankly, it's not going away anytime soon, because we're just not very good at it. Quite frankly. And the news focuses on and highlights the things that if you would ask people 20 months ago, are we good at this stuff? They'd be like, yeah, we're good. People are, have their own opinions, they're right for their choices, but no, we're not going to have an insurrection. We're not going to fight now. We're not going to topple, things over. No, we're good. Yeah, we're great. Black Lives Matter. Yeah, we have some things that happen, with the Black voice. Well, I think we've done better to integrate, socialize. Yes. And as an African-American male, I see it and you hear the stories, but now all of a sudden it's created another awareness. No, we're not as far along as we think. And that's not only societal, but that's also individually as well. And COVID just has exposed us on a lot of different fronts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, now you got to tell me about the book a little bit more, because you gave me something at the beginning, but then you gave me something along the way. You got to. Now I'm curious about the book.
Yeah, the book is really
the one that you've already written.
Yes. This book is it's, and I'll hold it up so people can actually see it, because if they haven't seen it, it's available on Barnes and Noble and Amazon, paperback and ebook. Audiobook is coming, but intention really is intended to provide clarity and steps to transform our individual stories.
Yeah.
It's a book that acts as a guide in building capabilities, and I'm key and critical and intentional about the word capabilities, because that's behaviors that are repeatable irrespective of situation. It takes a fresh look using research, experience of those of whom I've coached, as well as my own experience individually, as well as nonfiction, to create a story and illuminate the challenges we face across our path in doing something different. In particular, I refocused our idea of change to focus more up front, where I'm asking people to delve more into discovering what are they looking to solve. A lot of times I get a question of, I don't know what direction I should go on. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And there's a lot of confusion around just solving for anything, just because we're in a day and age where we're offering judgment. And in order to offer judgment, I have to have some level of action. And so that means I need to go out and do, which then leads me to just jumping and building a plan. But you're not really discovering what you're really solving for. Because what is presented to us is oftentimes masking the true issues, true challenges within ourselves and our own journeys. Yeah. And so I spend time with the reader to really uncover what that discovery is. The second piece around that I've really focused on up front is the principle of you. So we talked about it a little bit earlier in that journey of my own and what I work with people on, really to uncover who are the characters in our own story. Like what are the characters that I created? Now, I define characters not by our essence of I'm a brother, I'm a sibling, I'm an uncle, I'm a VP, I'm a Porsche owner. It's not defined by those things. Yeah. It's, guess what? I'm Mr. Know-It-All. And guess what? I have to have a degree for everything that I have. I need some level of validation that I'm smart enough. I'm like the cowardly lion, because every time I step into a certain situation, I act in a certain way. These first two parts of the book establish a foundation. And then within that principle of you, not to be lost, is around choice and acknowledging what am I willing to do, and also, as important, what am I not willing to do? We often embark upon our journeys as though we're just going to do everything. Like, yeah, I can go out there and do this. Yes, I can go out there and lose those 10 pounds. Yes, I can be a better communicator, X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Where you get the resistance is when you say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't feel comfortable with that. I'm not there yet. But yet we've held ourselves to the expectation. We've held ourselves to measuring of our success and failure by things that we didn't even acknowledge that we weren't willing to do, or better yet, we were willing to do. And so for those first two parts, it really set the foundation of the rest of the book of planning, experience, and attunement. Attunement being that pause, process, and reflect. And readers are taking on this journey in a way that they're solving for a specific concern now, while building the capability to use this book as a reminder for any changes that they have in the future. So I guess in essence, Intention is really a book that shows that successful personal transformations. I don't really care if it's personal, professional, trying to lose weight, trying to get a new job, just being better. Starts with you, and it's sustained with our ability to integrate and our gift of acknowledgement of who we are. And readers can pick this book up at any moment in time and offer us as a reminder to our own personal journeys and address any changes that we have in the future. And that's really what it means, as I say here at the title, to be able to master your intentions.
Yeah. Whew. That guys, if you're watching this, that book is not for the faint of heart.
No.
This man's gonna take you to some ugly places, and you're gonna see some ugly truth.
Yes,
But
it is a book. It is truly a book to be experienced, not flipped through. So that's what I want for people. And if we can do that, that's a win.
Love it. Love it. Well, Dr. Ian Brooks, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Well, I appreciate it, Neil. It's definitely been a pleasure having a conversation with you and talking more about what I know we're both passionate about, and that is business, people, and quite frankly, how do we define and create success? And a lot of ways to get there.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you and I have both been through a lot, and we've learned a lot, and we just see the need, and we have the desire to want to be able to pass that on and provide that to other people. And if there's really something to be able to impact another person's life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, hey, if there's monetary value out of it, that is nice.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it does not compare at all to knowing the impact that you've had on other people. So I can hear that just from all that you've shared about organizations and, that 13-year-old kid who, has built himself into the powerhouse and a know-it-all with all the degrees.
I wouldn't go that far. I've had to talk to that 13-year-old a few times to move me out of that box. But truly, it's very interesting how that individual has spawned into the person I am today. So it's been fun.
Well, I acknowledge the depth of thought that you have, the insight into people, even though most of them will never realize how much you've actually thought about them in those in the processes of for organizational change and things like that. But I recognize that you've had to think deeply on all of those things, and obviously had to go into deep places into yourself just to be able to be there and show up for other people. And so, hey, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
No, thank you, Neil. Pleasure to be here.
All right, guys. Well, that's Leadership to Wealth. And no, wait. Before we go, how do people get a hold of you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, there we go. So they can reach out to me on Instagram and Twitter. My handles are DrB_intention. As well, they can go to my website. That's rhodessmith.com, RHODESSMITH.com. And there they can find this podcast as well as others, my book, and other testimonials and other places I've actually have information, as well as information regarding my next step on my group coaching. So,
nice. Well, we're going to have some of those links in down below, so please check those out. Please check out Dr. Ian Brooks. And Doc, thank you so much. And it wouldn't be right, and if I didn't say, "What's up, Doc?"
Yeah.
And with that, we'll see you guys on the next episode of Leadership to Wealth. Thanks, guys, so much for watching.